Welcome back to Active Ingredients, the leadership series for people who build, scale, and shape the future of life sciences. I'm your host, Tom Dove, founder and CEO of Fraser Dove International. Today's guest is Paula Gildert, a procurement powerhouse whose career began in technical operations before rising to lead various global procurement categories across some of the world's largest pharma companies. Paula has spent decades helping organizations translate vision into execution, delivering large-scale transformation across AZ, Novartis, and Takeda, and leading global programs that have delivered billions in measurable value while building high-performing teams around the world. Her perspective on leadership started early. Paula's father served as a senior officer in the Royal Marines, where one lesson stood above all others: leadership is built on respect. In this conversation, we explore what it really takes to deliver impact at scale, why emotional intelligence matters as much as operational excellence, and how leaders continue to reinvent themselves over the course of their careers. Paula, welcome to Active Ingredients.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honoured.
No problem, no problem. You and I have had conversations over the years, and I'm really excited for today, especially when we did our prep for this. I know that you've done a lot of work and get a lot of really good topics for us to discuss today. But we always start the podcast in the same way. And I just want to understand what you believe are the three key ingredients of successful leadership and why.
Right, list of three. I'm going to start with a headline. It's about values and purpose. For me, that higher purpose, seeking a higher purpose linked to vision, is the standout reason that you should consider yourself a possible leader. Without that vision and purpose, why would anybody follow you? And I think that has to be underpinned by the values that you demonstrate in everything you do. And for me, that starts with courage. Being able to develop something, a future state that doesn't exist yet, is a scary prospect, whatever industry you're in. And it takes courage. And if you want to lead people, you have to instill in them a sense of trust that it's a purpose that they want to also work towards. And that authenticity, so that's a second value, isn't it? Authenticity, personal credibility, honesty, trust, integrity. Those are the things to me that unpack authenticity. And the last one, commitment. You have to want to be in it to the end and be 100% in service of it. And if you can do that, then people will feel a shared commitment, and then you might get there.
Yeah, love it. So values and purpose, authenticity and commitment.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, because commitment, that's actually the first time that answer has been as part of the values across all of the episodes so far. Because it's almost like, you know, I love that line you just get, you have to want to be in it. Some people accidentally find themselves in leadership roles and then they're working it out as they go. But it seems like you're very much focused on you got to have that desire and really got to push through it.
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, there's a lot to do, isn't there? We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the early years, obviously I mentioned your father earlier, but in the early years of your life, school, college, university, whatever, were there any signs that you were going to be in leadership? Were you one of those people where it was kind of within you from an early age?
I think it goes back to your personal drivers, and for me, it was always wanting to make things better, to actually influence and orchestrate with others, but be part of a thing, whether even it was small at school, like sports, or in school being a librarian or chair of the school council. So these sort of things were magnetic to me. I found myself drawn to them. I grew up I'm an only child. My father was a Royal Sergeant Major in the Royal Marines when he retired in his mid-40s, and I watched him as a child. I grew up surrounded by his leadership, and it was tough. I have to tell you, Royal Marine leaders are not soft, and that influenced me, and my ability to hold an argument, to hold my ground, to accept when I was wrong, be resilient and move forward. I think that was a massive shaping influence to me. But I was always interested in science and maths, even though I wasn't, I would say, top of the class. I wasn't useless at them, obviously, but I wasn't, they weren't my strongest subjects, but they were tough, and I loved tough. Challenge has always been a big driver for me.
Yeah, love it. And when you were at university, did the life sciences start to kind of come into view at that point in your life? Did you know, what kind of drew you towards the industry?
A colleague in my third year, I read physics at Manchester, talked to me about Christmas courses, first class travel, 5-star hotels, food and drink, and you might get a job. And I applied to ICI for it was a Christmas course in the final year to find out about careers in control electrical engineering. Now, as a physicist, that was quite a logical transition. Control engineering is maths on steroids. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I did attend. And whilst in that, I met control engineers who were new graduates, say 6 months ahead of me, already solving real world problems in a huge company. ICI was enormous in the mid 80s. And I was hooked, and they offered me a job, and the rest is history. But when I joined ICI, I found a lot of my control projects, the work they gave me in my 2 years as I became a chartered engineer, was in their pharmaceutical division. And I'm afraid once you work in the pharmaceutical industry, if you're driven by higher purpose, everything else is pale in comparison. So I never, ever in the 40 years that I've been in this industry have seriously considered moving into a different sector. You know, every day you get up and you think, I'm a part of a team that are changing the direction of people's lives. And that's awesome and a privilege.
Yeah. And you were also able to work in, like, before you embarked on your career in procurement, which we'll talk about, and lots of different transformation work, you know, you were working in some really like technical roles within engineering, technical operations. How did that like foundation, do you think, build well for the rest of your career?
Well, first of all, it's about technical credibility. So you come straight from university, you've had, I mean, I got a first class degree, but I was just an undergrad who had one degree, and now I'm in a industry with PhDs and masters and people who've been round that academic prowess loop for decades. So you feel very humbled about what you don't know. So your first thing is learning, agility, learn fast. And that learning curve was almost an exponential for me in those first years. And the benefit I had was a company that was very powered to expose new leaders to real world problems, deep end stuff, but with a lot of mentoring. And that was absolutely fantastic. Um, what was the question?
So I was keen to understand how those foundations within that kind of technical world then kind of propelled you for the rest of your career. And I think that you brought it into line really nicely there, where you said that technical credibility and being able to be a sponge, learning from those mentors, so that then you're able to kind of establish your technical credibility before you then were able to move into leadership roles. But you worked in engineering, production, manufacturing. Was it quite a different world to what it is now?
Well, when I first joined, there were very few female engineers. And that was a blessing and a curse, because had a high novelty value and it lasted approximately 30 seconds, which was the time it took for you to express your first thought or comment. And it comes back to that technical foundation. Why are you here? Why should I listen to you? And with time and experience and watching others, you do understand, it's not about technical. It's not just about the technical. It's that fusion of people and the technology, the work, that your nature of the work you're doing, that defines whether you're going to be a credible leader. And I think I had a lot of experiences actually very early on as a leader that were very challenging, where change is a constant with leadership, Business
Yeah.
is changing. And nowadays I look back and I think the pace of change, when I first started to work, there was no internet, there was no email. You wrote a letter, you waited 3 days for it to come back. Imagine you had that amount of time to consider. These days, leaders have to be on it all of the time. That's an incredible pressure. And I think that requires more capabilities. And in some ways, resilience is dialed up now full scale, because you are going to make mistakes. And the mistakes I made, I still live with. I wish I'd done differently. And there, as you look back on a whole host of good things and average and things you regret, those are the ones that I think young leaders, and to me, it's people first. And we're going to talk later about things that resonate. And for me, this is, people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, but they will never forget the way you made them feel.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the heart of leadership, because if you can make people feel able to direct their own work, their lives, their futures, to have a voice, to have agency, then you can do anything with them.
Yeah. And when did that shift happen for you then? We'll just kind of stick on that first leadership level, but when did you feel that you went from technical expert with credibility to leadership expert with the same kind of feel?
Yeah, I think it's when it was some of the humbling experiences. So I was very fortunate early in my career to lead teams. Within 18 months of graduation, I was posted to the south of England as an outpost engineer, the site control electrical engineer, and I ran the design office. And shortly after that, I was promoted into a manufacturing role as head of production for the computer control plants, and then all of the plants. And that's when I became less technically, my work was less about the technical stuff and more about managing teams who manage the technical stuff. And there were some very humbling experiences in there where working practices, I think one of the first changes that I was asked to lead that was transformational was to remove demarcation, which was that only artificers could do electrical work, only mechanical trained apprentices could do mechanical work, and so on. And it meant work took a long time. You had to have 3 people to do one task, even though maybe that you could train one person to do that entire task. And at that point in the early 90s, manufacturing industry in the UK, in pharmaceutical manufacture and other similar technologies, was getting hammered by competition in emerging markets in India and China. And we were becoming uneconomical. And in order to do that, we had to change the way we work. We had to change the time it took. We had to improve quality, lead time reduction, and all of those things come together. They are a holy triumvirate. But changing the way people work, which they have done for decades, which is going to cost them money and status, goes to the heart of what makes people feel valued. And as a leader, you have to tread lightly with that.
Yeah, and that was 18 months in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a baptism of fire, but that was when it felt like you'd earned your stripes, though, like early doors, straight into change, straight into transformation, and then you didn't look back.
No, because actually it's exhilarating. If you've got a team of people that you can jointly create a vision, that future state, and in this scenario, that it was compelling. This is the future of our site, our factory, our jobs, maybe even this division in this amazing company. So it sometimes, the story writes itself. Sometimes it's more subtle. You're a successful company. Why do we need to make this change? So building that purpose and getting people to buy into it, starting with leadership, and then the communication challenge is at the heart of this. People will do amazing things if they believe that's the right thing to do and that they want to do it. Not everybody will, and that's this concept of getting off the bus. And sometimes you want to invite people to get off the bus. But one of the most profound things I learned in my leadership journey is oftentimes you have the team you need. You just haven't rallied them around the right challenge.
Yeah.
Now, that's a generosity in leadership that you can train, you can develop people, and not all people are patient enough for that. But I look at myself and I think if I was joining a new team with a leader, I would want that leader to see possibility in me that I don't demonstrate today and invest in me. And then there's almost no limit to which I won't invest efforts.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the interesting thing for me from a leadership standpoint is I feel that the best leaders should be able to lead across different functions. Okay, because it's leadership is the heart of what you're trying to, master, not
Yeah.
necessarily the technical competence. And your career has then gone on to span some really cool areas. So you started in engineering, you moved into manufacturing, you've worked within the supply chain, outsourcing, and procurement space. So obviously, the leadership magic formula that you've bought, or the active ingredients that you spoke about earlier has worked really well for you. But I'm keen to kind of dig into a little bit of that, is how you've been able to deliver impact at scale across these different business functions. So how do you inspire and motivate teams to continually go through change management?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it is about why we're doing it. Um, and if I talk about a couple of the big changes that I did, um, we talked about that early career experience about fundamental economics of the industry changing, which means if we don't change, we won't be in jobs. That's a pretty easy sell, but you'd be surprised how many people were, that won't happen, that won't happen. And then you have to look at the context. Context is decisive. If you can't describe the environment in which the team, the group, the division even is operating, and what are the opportunities, it's not always threats, the opportunities, then you're going to struggle. I mean, one of the big re-engineering challenges I had for a global supply chain was for one of what was AstraZeneca at the time. One of their top drugs was going off patent, and yet it was still we really were working hard to produce enough material to feed the supply chains. But we knew at patent that market, that volume really drop. So we had to create a new set of supply scenarios in a time where everybody was, full pelt going for it. That was hugely challenging because reason to believe. And again, you had to look at the environment, and you will never convince everybody, but leadership is where you start. If you're a senior team, and communication, acumen in actually being able to sit with teams, these face-to-faces, they're very common now. They were less so in my early career. It was a bit more hierarchical, but now I love that we do more focus groups, that we actually sit down. And I think this is my tip for leadership, young leaders, is to really develop your listening and your curiosity to listen, because those insights and perspectives will shape your point of view, will influence the tactics in your strategy. The goal may not change, but that context is decisive. And then, you can re-engineer and design something different. And that's leadership. You're creating a future that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. And is that how you keep teams energized when you are in like a multi-year transformational, play? Is it being able to re-engineer, change, move, but still keep with that vision?
You have to celebrate the journey. And, it's never, nobody's ever had a strategy or a plan that they've been able to implement start to finish without change. I would love to have a conversation with people who say, oh, yes, that's how it happens. So agility. And I think that's where it's also an opportunity of leadership to raise energy. It's like a presentation, isn't it? How do you keep the attention going? Because it's a marathon. And how do you energize people for a marathon? And you have to celebrate the wins. And that's about getting senior leadership, C-suite, uh, getting customers, the people who you're serving, really, to recognize the contribution that you're making. The simple stuff, having a KPI interim review and celebration. There was one change project in a P2P platform, which was in fact a reinstallation because the initial platform had gone in and the workflow, the user interface was so diabolical. The audit was red. I took on the job at the time and it was almost like, this is a job you'll get fired from. That's a challenge. I'll take it. And I went in with the team and we built a plan. And I said, if we can make these KPIs green within the next 8 months, I will come to work dressed as an elf. It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. But the thought of me doing that, they did it in 6. I had to hire a high quality elf costume. It wasn't a shabby DIY job. And I went into work and it was hilarious. They didn't think I'd do it. And it was such a small thing. But they really worked hard to humiliate me and it was great. I didn't mind at all.
Yeah, good. And I love it because I think that sometimes the seriousness of the change can be all consuming as well. That's a great, you got to try and take some of the pressure out in order for people to then, be the best version of themselves. Yeah.
And that's our job, because when you're running a marathon, who helps the runner succeed? It's the people at the side of the road offering the water and the granola bars. It's a team effort, and there are the hierarchy of needs, which I've just done for the marathon runner, is not enough. It's also that anxiety that people, I don't know how to do this. You've never done it before. It's being again back to those conversations. How can people share what's missing for them? And how do you then reorchestrate to make those missings resolve? It might be information. It might be that they need more resource. I mean, that's an easy one to cite because everybody wants more resource. But, what are the critical things, and how do you, and this leads to creativity, and people, when excited, can be incredibly creative.
Yeah. And I love, within that kind of procurement or sourcing world as well, there is an added layer of complexity from a, value creation standpoint as well. So what's one of the, tangible levers that you would pull when it comes to value creation that maybe leaders are overlooking at the moment?
So in life sciences, it's all about speed and quality. I remember an interview I had with the president of R&D for one role, asked me, speed, quality, cost, which one comes first? Now, in drug development, it's speed, but its close cousin is quality, because basically a clinical trials data. So that data has to have quality trademark. Cost is a really third in the list, but so this is the mistake, I think. If you work on speed and quality, cost comes along. It's so obvious. You take a clinical trial as an example. If you look at the typical delays in recruitment, closing last patient in, analyzing data, locking database, it's all about the quality of the work, things that are missing that need to be done, delays. Now, if you can work on speed, what are the key drivers of delays? If you can remove those elements, if you can improve business processes, workflows, then speed, quality, and the cost to do it will come. So a lot of people, a lot of C-suites, and I've worked for a lot of CFOs, are obsessed with the jaws, quite right, sales, costs, and they want them as wide as they possibly can. When you look at the roles of chief procurement officers, it's often on that bottom line. How do we get the cost down? My disruption, if you like, was focus on the business processes and the way the value is being created. And if you do that, not only will you be having a strategic conversation with the business that they want to have, instead of an impoverished conversation, which is we can get 10% out here, 5% out, 20%. That will come along. I am not being naive. You will always have that demand on the jaw, and it's important. And there is a universal fact that when I was president and chair of the board for Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, I couldn't believe that this seems to be an industry statistic. 50% of the dollar of sales, so 50 cents on every dollar of sales, goes out the door in goods and services. That's a huge resource. So your best people should be in procurement. And the way they do it is to have strategic relationships with the business about how we drive speed and quality and the way we do it.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because value creation in, procurement or strategic sourcing has always been, the kind of hacienda or the paradise, but as you say, sometimes if you are focused more on cost, then the speed and the quality actually gets impacted negatively. And it's crazy.
Such a dull conversation.
Yeah.
You're going in to talk to the head of development. Let's talk about how we can get 20% out of your budget. Instead, imagine, I want to talk to you about what's missing for you to be able to deliver these programs faster, blah, 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 blah. Whatever is the magic button in that context. Context is decisive. You need to do your homework. What is going to get them on the bus with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the reality of some of the bold transformations that you've been part of, because you bring it to life so eloquently. Creating strategy is obviously one thing. What's the difference, I suppose, between the bold objective that you come up with and the real outcome?
Yeah. So one of the great gifts I had as a young leader was working with a group of people who work on this very essence of breakthrough thinking. How do you deliver extraordinary results? Now, every year, people are setting targets. It's a requirement of business. It's good because, if you don't have a goal, you don't have a stretch. Goals are really important in every domain of your life. Breakthrough thinking isn't about pipe dreams. It's about setting a goal that is, a stretch. You don't know how you're going to get there. But we know in life, if you set a target and you work hard towards it, you might not get there, but you'll get further than if you didn't. And that's a reality. And I think as we get more senior and the stakes are higher, there's risk about setting ambitious goals. Your credibility, your teams, perhaps even the division or the company. So it's a scary space, goal setting. And you get lots of behavior around, under promising and over delivering, which is also a hazard because the market and the board take that behavior very dimly.
Yeah.
And, many companies have got stakeholders, shareholders, and this matters. So breakthrough thinking is actually about how do I get these stretch goals and turn them into reality? And there are some very simple behaviors, which when you start to get into it, really makes it tangible and possible. And one of them is about that stretch goal, but then it's aligning your leadership team around your commitment to it. And then what is missing to get there, and being very grounded. And it might be, if only we could, I don't know, it's understanding your business process. What are the lead time blockers and doubling down on those. And then it's a question of what promises do you need to make? I will deliver that resource. I will make that change. I will have that conversation. I remember some of the most ridiculous challenges were the most simplest to solve. What's stopping you from getting this project team started? You've said it's going to take you three months to get all the resources together. What's stopping you? Well, I don't own them. I have to go and talk to X, Y, and Z. Well, who? Let's talk about X, Y, and Z. This is a senior VP. They're very busy. Where's their office? Oh, they're across the corridor from me. Are they in their office? Yes, they're in their office. They're sat at their desk. Is the door open? Yes, the door is open. Why don't you get off your chair, go and knock on the door and ring me back? And he said, what am I going to say? I'm going to say, well, tell him what you just told me, that you've had this resource, you could get this team up in a month, and it was worth 2 years and something like $6 million. So they did. They knocked on the door, and it was the fear of having a conversation with a very senior leader who might not want to talk to them. I'm only a project manager. You're walking through the door with a massive lead time and a massive cost reduction. Why wouldn't they want to hear you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the simple stuff, isn't it? It's a conversation. So breakthrough thinking distills down to what promises am I making? What requests am I going to make? And it's as simple as that. And being authentic. Why am I asking you this question?
Yeah, because I love the way that you bring it to life. And I think that like the authenticity also with like the communication style, what you are saying and how you are saying it is also very important. And I think that, during a transformation, if you've built trust, you are your authentic self and you're bringing it to life in the right way, surely that's a good recipe for successful transformation or change management.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is maybe what makes transformations fail. Even when the strategy itself looks good, what happens when they fail?
Well, the obvious answer is poor execution, but I think it's more than that. I think it's also about the context. Things change. And I think you have to be on top of that all of the time. And that requires stakeholder engagement. Who else is influencing? And it might not be within the company, it might be the market. I mean, look at the geopolitical environment we're in now. And I think now, not the only time, but dialed up extremely urgently now, is how diverse our supply chains are, how global some of them are, and the huge risk that that now brings to organizations. There's also a personal or national pride thing about the industries within our country. So transformations fail because of execution, but it's not just your omission or missing. It's that context. And I remember one of the biggest projects I led for a very large global pharma was when the strategy for the product portfolio changed. And that is a norm in our industry. So what we were trying to do was exit a particular franchise, and we were going to divest. And we worked for 6 months at how we would do it with external partners. We wrote operational plans right into the detail, multifunctional teams from third parties and the pharma. It was extremely rewarding to do. I went on holiday. I arrived on the Monday morning, got a phone call. The results of this trial is in. We're back in this business. So that whole strategy was, and for me, the challenge then was to go back to all those partners with whom, they'd invested, they'd got VPs for this and VPs for that, they'd created capacity and space. And it's a big credibility challenge for me as a leader, representing that business opportunity to them, to say it's gone.
Yeah.
And then be able to work with them again. So that really then starts to pull on the investments you've made, the relationships you've built, the integrity that you've worked with them with, that they can. And it is bad. Business is mostly bad news with a spattering of good. If you're in a high change environment, it's not a balance. So you have to be able to work through some of those, really dramatic changes and be intact.
Yeah, and I think that, something that's been throughout all of your career, and a lot of the conversations that we've had as well, is that you've always had you've always been leading with emotional intelligence.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, when you look at your values as well that you gave, or your key, active ingredients of leadership, it's clear that you're, very clear on what your values are. What have you learned, I suppose, from working with leaders whose values didn't align with yours? How were you able to then kind of really work on the emotional intelligence to ensure that, you know, you can move forward in the
Yeah,
right way?
it's a great question, and it's a tough one. And the reality, sadly, is it's a common situation. Um, I think one of our or my personal hopes is that I've influenced others to lead with that integrity and values that I have, and to see that it is a successful algorithm, because some of the successful leaders are there with a different algorithm, which is not one that I want to follow. So, role models, looking at people who inspire you. But it does happen. Um, and one example I had was when I was changing countries, and it was clear that, and the leader changed as I came into the role. So it wasn't, you talk about you leave a company, you don't leave a company, you leave a leader. And here I was joining a company, and the leader was changing, and it was a very different person. And so, first of all, you really invest to understand where they're coming from and their needs. They will rapidly, as in that scenario, you realize your differences. Now, I look back and I know I could have done things differently. Sometimes honesty is best delivered in short, small measures.
Yeah.
um, and some people are less flexible. I mean, one of the things I learned from the breakthrough work is that, and it's a very easy thing to say, and it's a hugely difficult thing to do. The most flexible person always wins. And that doesn't mean you give in, by the way,
No.
the opposite. That means you are actually 100% in your commitment, but you have to be flexible about how you get there. Now, that doesn't mean throwing out your values either, or becoming like the behavior. And one of the benefits I had was a project on for about 12 months, leading a change program in increasing diversity and inclusion capabilities in senior leadership. And this was about business performance, but gave me an opportunity to really dig into, diversity and inclusion, what it really means to improve uh, performance of people and the health of organizations.
Yep.
And I'm really grateful for the time I did spend doubling down on that. And how you handle difficult conversations is everything. And you have to practice.
Yeah. And what advice do you give to leaders about either difficult conversations or maybe even protecting your teams while still trying to deliver results? How do you go around that?
So some of that is about creativity. In other words, the facts are the facts. And in a high performance organization, you're delivering regular updates on progress. Um, Sometimes there are micro differences that you can manage without seeking permission, but will have a profound impact on the person or team for whom that difference is really valuable. And some of it's personal. It might be about recruitment. Again, going back to this diversity challenge, what is, and this, Thomas, better than me, that the ideal candidate is sometimes difficult to sell into senior leaders. They don't see what you see,
Yeah.
but they're not going to manage that talent either. You are. So sometimes I think I'm not talking about not being open, because I mean, with a hire, you can't, that's very visible, and they're going to be on talent matrices and all the rest of it. But sometimes I think and also it's about how you reward. Some people have a very different view to me about the playfulness, fun, and reward. So I would always invest in conferences, meetings, celebrations.
Yeah.
But I would be creative. How can I do it in a cost-effective way? How can I do it in a way that isn't going to attract, criticism? Mostly it comes from a place of, I wish I had that opportunity.
Yeah.
But so I think you have to be imaginative. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one.
Yeah. And what about the communication piece? Like, have you ever been, and I think you and I spoke about this before, but have you ever been taught how to bring to life different ways of saying things, different communication styles to ensure that, when we're on that emotional intelligence piece, though, it's like, as I said, it's not necessarily what you're saying, but it's how you're saying it.
Yeah, very well put. So again, I had, through working with some of the best companies in the world, the privilege to get some, I would say, world-class training. And there was one particular company. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who they are.
No, up to you. Don't worry. We'll keep it out.
If people want to know, you're going to find
Send
me.
you a message on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Send me a message. And it was a game changer. And I had that training in the mid-80s when I was at the factory down in the south of England. The whole leadership team went on the training. And basically, its purpose was to have impactful conversations. And this is not just a presentation in front of a huge crowd or a small crowd or on a podcast. It's in an email. It's in a document. It's in a conversation. I mean, the essence is we only have two tools, really: the way we listen and the way we speak. And there's a lot of work in this, attention spans, tips and tricks. And once you've had some of this training, you see it in professionals in media, presenting the news. And these are tips and tricks. Get them. You will integrate them to a greater or lesser extent, depending on how comfortable you are with them. But it is about practice. And honestly, it's a huge investment. And people have very little patience. I think less and less now. So the ability to be succinct, and I am still a learner. I am a learner. So, you will do better than me. But it's such a superpower. And I would invest in it with urgency. It will pay dividends.
Yeah, and was it almost like, I don't want to say acting training, but it was like, just the whatever the terminology is, but as you say, it's like the impact of what you're saying in a more concise and succinct way, but it's having training and real kind of credibility then in what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Yeah, I mean, they give you a framework which you can then apply. And I think for me, as a very busy person, and I'm sure the people listening to our conversation are exactly like that. You want something that you can apply quickly and that takes the anxiety out of it. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Well, there's a million things I could say. What are the so the framework is absolutely brilliant, and it cuts like a hot knife through butter all the million things to be really clear. What are the three questions that my audience want to know or answer? It depends whether you're convincing somebody or informing them. There's always a goal, right? So you've got to be clear, what is your goal, so that you can be focused on it. But that framework, but also, I mean, the really professional people, I mean, actors, they go to RADA, so the people who did this training were RADA trained, and it's a 3-day program if you do it if you are interested. I put all my leadership teams through it, and you can see them have impact compared to their peers. It's so rewarding. But the RADA people, they spent, I think there was like, they spent, oh, I can't remember whether it was 3 days or a week on just saying the word the. I mean, there is so much in it, but we only go on the it's fascinating and it's a superpower. So go get some.
Yeah, I like it. I think that all of the real actionable leadership frameworks are fantastic. And as you say, it's the way that you can articulate the message, good, bad, indifferent. It's how you say it and what impact you can make for the person that's receiving it. Okay, so what I wanted to do now was talk about leading beyond the org chart. Okay, so once you've gone through your corporate career, you know, working with some really interesting transformations in some of the world's largest companies, you've now moved into a strategic advisory, board member, mentor type world, you know, that kind of second mountain. What does leadership without hierarchy now mean to you?
Very good. So they call it the third chapter, actually, where your first chapter is education, getting yourself tooled up, although that is a journey through life, of course. And the second chapter is your professional career, wherever that may be. And then the third chapter is, you know, so I was going to say retirement, but it isn't, is it? So I would describe myself now as probably busier than I was before, because right now it's such an abundance of choice, and it's exhilarating because it's a freedom of choice. So I wanted to really try and be able to lever some of the amazing experience, learning in a way that could have impact without being an executive running the P&L or whatever. And there are different ways to do that. So you can go onto formal boards, which could be big or medium-sized public companies. They are hierarchical. And the difference about the board roles are to executive roles are noses in, fingers out. Now, that's a big transition because most of our lives, we have our hands in the product. We are literally driving and accountable. And most of us are energized, rewarded by that accountability, that responsibility. So to have, it's not that board members don't have responsibility, they do. Fiducially, they are ultimately accountable. So, but you don't have your hands on it. Now, that is quite a transition. So I have actually found that I've gravitated towards advisory boards. But before I talk more about those, there are other boards. You can go on family founder company boards, which have a very different energy because the founder leads, and ultimately you can imagine that there's a lot the decision making, but it's still hierarchical.
Yeah.
And there are more personalities. Maybe that's not true. It's different.
Yeah.
And then the third is the voluntary sector, which is enormous and honestly hugely rewarding, unpaid, and totally consuming if you're not careful. So you have those choices I was talking about. But advisory boards, to me, are a kind of really exceptional middle ground where they want you for your skills and expertise, but they don't just want a bit of advice, which possibly is underselling that. I'll retract that. They want you to actually help them shape the strategy, maybe even shape the deck that they're building, the investor pitch that they're building. And I have found that hugely rewarding. And I work with a CRO and a technology AI, Gen AI, network science technology company. And that is amazing.
Yeah. And how do you stay like curious, I suppose, and courageous in that next chapter? As you said, you're almost busier but with more freedom. So how are you kind of how are you managing it? How are you stepping into that world?
Sounds like a paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's because I've chosen, and I think, I mean, you choose your job, you choose your company, but there is a lot more consequence as an executive. And now, I'm in my third chapter. I have financial stability. My children are grown up. I have two grandchildren. So when some of the drivers, like a mortgage and paying school fees and things, disappear, you can choose to go where your passion, your interests lie. And some of these might be in interests. So we had a period of time we lived in Boston in the US, and my husband and I took up ballroom dancing. Weren't very good. And when we came back to England, we thought, let's carry on. We found a dancing school near us. And we went and had our first lessons, and the dance instructor started to talk about a charity that he runs and how his board was, you know, he needed different things, skills in his board, and so I thought I can help. So I did, and I'm now nearly 2 years later, and um, it's a paradance charity, which is disabilities. It started as wheelchair, but now it's all sorts of diverse, including neurodiversity, but also physical disability, and the ability of dance to improve health, mental and physical, is profound and proven. So it's such a rewarding sport. And now we're the national governing body for the UK, and we had a competition in October that was 13 countries, and
Oh, I love
you
it.
see all of these athletes, and our goal is to build an Olympic team for Britain. So from a dance lesson to being invited into this transformation and change, and we're all unpaid. And it's amazing what you can do. It's exhausting, actually. It's a burden. Some days I wake up, funding, it's all about funding. But there are so many things you can do that are going to pull on your skills that you may not have even thought possible. So your third chapter, I think, is one to embrace with joy. Everybody will have different choices.
Yeah. And what's clear with you is that you, with the freedom and with your own like openness and curiosity, you are doing something about it. Others see it and or see others and think, how do they get those opportunities? How is so and so on a board of, I don't know, paradancing? But it's because they are open to having the discussions and then committed, as you said earlier, is one of your leadership values, committed to making things happen and getting involved. So, I think it's been, wonderful for you to talk about this like reinvention phase. And it seems as though you've taken some of your, you know, career positivity and put it into this third chapter, and there's no
It's
stopping
like
you.
your DNA, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. I love it.
But I didn't mention training. The board thing is not a given, because it is about a position of huge responsibility, and people need to trust you. Why would they invite you to join, um, and have such an impactful role unless they trust you and know you? Um, so I did some training. I was fortunate to have some people who'd been on this program and were very, very complimentary. So I applied. It was not without some deep thinking, but I was privileged to attend a program at Harvard, which is called Women on Board Succeeding as a Corporate Director. And it was a game changer. I'm now part of a network of participants, alumni, 500 amazing senior execs across the world who fuel and inspire me. And I've got a number of roles in that network. That's one of the 5 jobs. But it again is something that I did not anticipate would come from this program. But the positions I got and the other colleagues that I work with, the majority of those placements are through people you know.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, find out more, get some training. You don't have to, there's loads of stuff online you can do. But also start talking to people in companies and industries and make it known that that's what you're interested in. And I would say a good transition is to start thinking about that 12, 18 months before you step out of your executive role.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice, because lots of people do it 12 to 18 months after, or they're struggling and almost, I don't want to say scrabbling, I think that's the wrong word, but there is a frustration where
Yeah.
things haven't gone as clearly as they had done in their career path before. So I
Yeah.
think this advice is absolutely fantastic. Getting training, working hard on your network, but also giving yourself time when you're in your corporate job. I mean, not that you'd be spending, 10 days a month on
No.
it, but enough time to set yourself up properly.
And actually, what I would say, Thomas, is that employers, in my experience, were very supportive. I mean, president of R&D, when I said, will you sponsor me on this program? P.S. It's very expensive. He was, I am so glad you are focusing on something for you. Because, he'd seen me for 4 or 5 years, really giving it a lot for him and his team and the company. And that's another learning point. You do need to invest. It's your career. First, second, or third chapter. So don't be afraid to ask. It goes back to this breakthrough thinking. If you don't ask, you'll not get an answer.
Yeah, love it. So I like to wrap these podcasts, with an optimistic view on the future. Okay. Can we talk about the future of life sciences? What's exciting you most about the future, or what do you think the evolution is going to look like? What's in your mind?
Well, I'm excited about it, unequivocally. Unequivocally, I mean, it is my nature. But the quality of healthcare and therapies and innovations that improve the quality of lives affects all of us, everywhere. It's one of the stickinesses about it. Whilst when I found the luck, most projects, 40 years ago in pharma, never wanted to work anywhere else. It's one of the most precious roles, industries you can be part of. And yet it's the least understood by I think, the wider society. Many people know where I'm going from. The number of taxi drivers who've railed at me about, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, and it's least understood and least liked. And I still, I'm horrified that when they do these surveys of industries, pharmaceutical is at the bottom, along with oil, tobacco, gas. And now, banking's been there in the last 10 years. We're down there. How can this be possible? So we need to be able to develop new therapies more quickly, more cheaply, because affordability is at the heart of access. This is the one time where I do put cost really at the heart of the goal of the industry. And when you get important leaders who are challenging, paradigms that have been around since the industry started, it needs to be fair. And as a human being, you want access. So, philanthropic leaders investing millions to eradicate polio or, tuberculosis. I mean, as technical leaders, how do we really make sure that we continue on this incredible visionary work? And we have to look at every stage of it. So there's so much work to do. Drug discovery, development, commercialization, supply chains. We talked a bit about services. It's complex, and right now it's more complex and challenging in the world that we find ourselves living and working within. So we need leaders who can really think through the risk and the opportunities and fight for what needs to be done. There is no higher purpose.
Yeah, and it's funny because that over the last, 5 years, we've had pharmaceutical companies on front pages of newspapers, probably more than in the couple of decades before. So there is time for positive change because people now know company brands in the industry where they didn't used to know as many. So
Yes.
it is ripe for, as you said, you're unequivocally excited about it, but there is still a lot of work to be done to change the tides of positivity within the industry.
Yes. Yeah. Reputation.
Yeah.
Those surveys are all about reputation. So what are we doing to move the needle on that? Um, and my 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 hope for the disruptive technologies, and honestly, that they're always there. They have a little pause, and then the next one comes along like a hammer.
Yeah.
Um, embrace them. I mean, I've doubled down to try, and I've got other colleagues who've gone deeper and deeper than I. The disruption around the generative technology um, AI brings can be harnessed for good. The key is human in the loop. And the key is enough knowledge to be aware of risks and threats. And then leadership, governance, manage them. So the Women on Boards work, we're doing a lot. I'm co-chair of this year's symposium in October, 10-year anniversary. And we're really doubling down on governance around technology, because it's where boards make decisions that will impact the shape of the workforce, the environment in which we're operating, and the success we have. So it's crucial.
Yeah, and that leads me on nicely, I think, to the future of leadership. How or what qualities do you think will define the next generation of life sciences leaders with all of the change which is probably going to come societally and technology aligned?
Yeah, I don't know how many had the opportunity, and you can still get it, to read or hear Mark Carney's speech this year at Davos. And this was right in the grip of the changes that were coming around tariffs, other challenges which have only deepened, regrettably, in the last month. And he was talking about the geopolitical uncertainty and the shift of power, and the importance of size. And, for somebody wired like me, that is such an inspiration to get up and do something about it. And Carney's speech goes to it. And there was this fantastic one-liner that basically said, unless you can re-engineer your conversation and your ability to be more independent, and if you're not at that table, you're on the menu. It's a really good speech, and it's such a rally to leadership. So I really recommend people. It's very quickly and easily assimilated and easy to find. And
Yeah,
so
I
that's
love it.
it. How do you manage that risk so that your business can ride the waves? And that means different investments. And we've seen them move quickly, haven't we? Manufacturing moving quickly.
Yeah.
And that's not the first time that's happened, but the speed with which it's happening. And that leads you then on to embracing technologies that allow you to move with speed and to re-engineer work so that the human in the loop is doing the bit that does require the governance, the risk, the analysis. I mean, knowledge management is not going to be the role. There are so many knowledge management roles in the past. Nowadays, you have to verify, as you always have as a scientist, but now you can do hours of prep in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that erodes your edge straight away, because everybody else has done it too. So now it's your perspectives, your insights, what the context in which that data. So those are the skills that leaders, and I don't think that's changed actually.
but what
But
I
the
have,
speed has.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. What I do really like though is how you are already embracing some of these disruptive technologies, thinking about how that is going to disrupt teams, leaders. And I think that, that, as you said, throughout this entire discussion, is having that context, curiosity and courage to make change is going to be really important. Paula, I've absolutely loved today's discussion. We have covered so many good topics. It's been brilliant. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I know that the listeners will.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. If I've given a little bit of guidance or a reassurance, I will be I'm extraordinarily pleased. This is great work. It's a privilege, and we have to treat it as such. And good luck, everybody.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Paula.